It's time to face the truth. The greatest battle you'll ever fight is not against the world, but against yourself. And at the core of this internal struggle is one thing: your ego. That insidious force inside you that craves constant validation, recognition, and approval. It feeds on praise, thrives on attention, and holds you hostage to the opinions of others. But here's what you need to realize: your ego is not your friend. It's the biggest barrier between you and your potential. And the longer you feed it, the weaker you become. Your ego whispers lies. It tells you that you need others to validate your worth, that your value is measured by how much attention you command. It convinces you that every failure, every criticism, every rejection is a personal attack. But feeding that ego is like feeding a monster. The more you give it, the hungrier it becomes, demanding more, consuming more, until it leaves nothing behind but a shell of who you truly are. Understand this: your ego isn't interested in your growth. It doesn't care about progress, improvement, or fulfillment. It only wants to preserve its fragile illusion of superiority. But here's the hard truth: you cannot evolve while catering to your ego. You cannot become the person you're meant to be while chasing the fleeting approval of others. The moment you stop feeding your ego is the moment you reclaim your power. That's when you step into a new level of awareness, where you stop living for the applause and start living for the truth. The ego wants you to stay in the safe zone, where everything looks perfect, where failure is hidden, where vulnerability is avoided. But growth happens in the discomfort, in the silence, in the places your ego fears the most. You see, feeding your ego keeps you trapped in a cycle of insecurity and fear. You start to believe that without the constant validation of others, you're not enough. But let me tell you something. You are enough right now, even without the applause, even without the accolades, even without the external recognition. Your worth is not dependent on how many people approve of you. It is found in the person you become when no one is watching, in the work you put in when the world isn't looking. True strength doesn't need a stage. It doesn't require an audience. It's built in the quiet hours, behind the scenes, when you're grinding in silence. The ego hates that silence, because in silence, there's no one to impress, no one to glorify you, no one to feed the illusion. But in that silence is where real transformation happens. That's where the magic lies. You need to understand something profound: your ego is terrified of your potential. Why? Because your potential doesn't need to be coddled or praised. It doesn't need to be validated by anyone but yourself. Your potential thrives in solitude, in discipline, in self-awareness. And to unlock it, you have to be willing to starve the very thing that's been holding you back: your ego. The minute you stop feeding your ego, you stop giving power to the opinions of others. You stop living your life based on what you think people want from you, and you start living based on what you need to become. That's when you can step into your true identity. That's when you start making moves that are not for show, but for growth. You see, the ego makes you fragile. It makes you fear failure because it's obsessed with perfection. It makes you avoid risks because risks expose your flaws, but real growth requires failure. It demands risk. It asks you to step into the unknown, to embrace the possibility of falling short, not because you're weak, but because that's how strength is built. When you feed your ego, you become addicted to the highest praise, admiration, approval. But just like any addiction, it leaves you empty when the high fades. And it always fades, always. The applause will die down. The compliments will stop. The validation will disappear. And if you've spent your life feeding that need, you'll find yourself lost the moment it's gone. But if you starve it, if you train yourself to find fulfillment in the work, not the recognition, you become unshakable. You become someone who doesn't need the world's approval to know their worth. Stop feeding your ego, and you will start building something real. You will start doing the work that matters, not the work that looks good to others, but the work that is meaningful to you. You will stop seeking validation and start seeking mastery. You will stop chasing popularity and start chasing purpose. Because here's the thing, ego will always try to keep you small. It will convince you to stay where it's safe, where you're comfortable, where you're admired. But you were not made for comfort. You were made for growth, for expansion, for greatness. And greatness doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being relentless, from being willing to risk everything to become who you are destined to be. Your ego wants to play it safe. It wants to avoid criticism, rejection, and failure. But what it doesn't understand is that the only way to truly win is to embrace all of those things. Criticism teaches you where you need to grow. Rejection shows you the path you need to adjust. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is the foundation of it. When you stop feeding your ego, you free yourself from the fear of failure. You free yourself from the need to impress. You free yourself from the suffocating weight of other people's expectations. And that freedom is priceless. It allows you to take bold action, to pursue your goals without hesitation, to live fully and authentically. So today, make the decision. Stop feeding your ego. Stop letting it control your actions, your thoughts, your life. Stop living for the approval of others and start living for the growth of yourself. When you do, you will unlock a power you didn't even know you had. You will become someone who doesn't need applause to keep going, who doesn't need recognition to know they're on the right path. You will become someone who is unstoppable. Not because others say you are, but because you know you are. Because you've put in the work. Because you've sacrificed the applause for progress. Because you've chosen to live not for the world's approval, but for your own greatness.